So if this is my performance over time, okay, I'm up and down, all over the place, but we know it's natural variation. Where do you think you would set me as a target, my manager? Any ideas? Sorry? Up the top, okay? Some people say at the average, okay? So what do you think that does to me? Every other day there, I'm going to go home unhappy, so I can't meet the target. If you meet it at the top, I'd like to work with you. If you meet it at the top, I'll never go home happy. Alright? I've never met my stretch target. And if I put it here, what's the point of having a target in the first place? Right? And Deming talked about this in the 40s, okay? And he said, what's the problem with targets after studying a number of organisations, alright? The problem is, they don't work. Alright? And I like this quote, if you give a manager a numerical target, he'll make it, even if he has to destroy the company process. Right? Just think about Bearings Bank, think about the GFC, lots of companies are running themselves this way. So the other thing is that targets don't motivate people. And the most downloaded article at Harvard Business Review is like Freddie Kurtzberg on motivation. Lots of managers are trained on motivation. They go and download it thinking there's going to be some tips in there that will teach them how to motivate people. And each time it's reprinted, the font gets bigger on page 1. So page 1 says you cannot motivate people. Right? Extrinsic motivation does not work. Intrinsic motivation does. You want people to have motivation from within. Okay? You can set up environments which gives you that intrinsic motivation. You can't imprint intrinsic motivation on somebody else. Okay? So setting a target is going to demotivate people. So this quote from a cutter consultant, which I talked about this morning, is really valuable insight. Jim Highsmith talked about this at the Agile conference recently. So the cutter consultant met loads of CIOs, and he said, I recently asked a CIO whether he preferred to deliver a project somewhat late and over budget but rich with business value and benefits, or one that's on time and under budget but with scant business value. He thought about it, it was a tough call, and then went for the on-time scenario. So delivering on time within budget is part of his IT department's performance metrics, in other words, his targets. Chasing after the elusive business value is not, so he's going to ignore that, okay? So when some people see this presentation, they almost shrink in horror, so managers go into cardiac arrest, okay? What do you mean no targets? How can you possibly run an organisation without targets? Well, instead, and I can show you about this later, we have what's the purpose from the customer's point of view that they come to our organisation, and what's the measures relating to the customer, and we run our organisation that way. So we don't have arbitrary targets, we have measures that tell us how well we're doing from the customer's point of view. That's why we're here. So the third principle of variation is working on the causes of variation are always found in the system, okay? Always found in here. That's what we should be working on. So Deming found the majority of possibilities for improvement in any organisation is down to the system. In fact, 95% he found is down to the system. The other 5% is the person, alright? So I was working on the 5% there, I was berating the workers when really it was down to the system. So I've done this talk before, people say, hold on a minute, I'm agile, this is rubbish, right? Not only do I not have a command and control project manager, I don't even have a project manager. Right? We're completely in charge of our own destiny. We do retrospectives, so we can change our process every 2 weeks. So I'm agile, this doesn't apply to me, okay? This is old school, this is the 40s, on production line and that kind of stuff, alright? So I would say that you work in a system and you have your own red beads in whatever system that you work in. So what we call these red beads are system conditions, so things like policies, procedures, measures, targets, how the work's designed. Upstream, it could be the business case, it could be the funding, it could be really poor requirements. I worked for a startup, had fantastic engineering teams, built something that nobody wanted. Right? That's a red bead, massive red bead for that team, okay? Further in the system. Downstream, inspection, things like ISO change advisory boards, compliance. There was a guy at the Agile conference recently, a CEO, who stood up and said, my development team is so successful, they're producing software at such a rate, my marketing department can't keep up. They don't know what to market, my sales department can't keep up. They don't know what to sell. That's not a problem with the IT department, right? That's a problem with the system, it's a system issue. Okay, so the new job of management is to go and work on anything that's beyond the team's control, okay? And we often say that removing impediments or keeping impediments. If you want your teams to perform more, go and work on the system of things that are hindering performance. Okay, go and work on the 95%. So the fourth principle of variation is understanding variation tells you when something has happened. So these charts help differentiate between signals from noise. Okay, this isn't a signal. This is just natural variation within the system. Okay, if you get something like this, that could be a signal that something's going to go wrong. Right? These are end-to-end times to do something for a customer. Suddenly it's 90 days. Right? Where I've worked, we get pulled into a war room. Right, so it's gone to 90 days. What do we do? Let's change the process. It might have been a one-off. This is why Deming talks about tampering with the system. You put something in place that might actually make things worse. So I worked in an organisation where we had one failed live release. So the knee-jerk reaction was to introduce change advisory boards. Okay, ISO change advisory boards. No piece of software would be released unless it's gone through that CAB, okay, the change advisory board. After a year, we look back and say, how much extra money has that cost us? Hundreds of thousands of pounds. How many extra defects have they found? 0. Okay? It's one of these reactions where we've got to modify the process because something's gone wrong. If it's a repeatable issue, let's go to the root cause and switch it off. And our charts will tell us how well we've done, whether it's worked or not. So what we can do with our charts, these are real life charts from the BBC, it's not being filmed, so I can show you these. It went wrong. Okay? We changed the process and the end-to-end times to get stuff done. This is lead time. When a customer asks for something to when it's actually in their hands, it's got worse. Okay? But we know it because we've got this data in the charts. Here, it's gone right. Alright? So we've made some changes, but we know from the customer's point of view, it's worked. Okay? So we've got real data on how the team's performing. We can also use it as a comparison tool. So don't put story points in there. If this is cycle time, unless you've got a time machine, you can't gain the cycle time, it's in the last days. Team 3 here have got a really low variation. Let's go and visit them. Alright? What are they doing that's different to the other teams? What system conditions have they removed? We can go and learn from them and then try and experiment in our own system. So this is a good quote from a guy called Robert Rodin. He says he took his management team, his senior management team with him, to one of Deming's red bead experiments. He said it was a caricature, it was absurd and obvious. That's what a lot of people think when they see this stuff. Unfortunately, it cut practically close to the truth of how we managed in that organisation. Right? He wrote that about 20 years ago, and we still see that today in the organisations that we work with. So let's quickly look at the behind the scenes on that spreadsheet. One of these charts, one of the variation charts was plotting. So as you can see, these are the red beads that were found by the workers, okay? And there's your upper control limit, there's your lower control limit, there's your average, and you can see it's completely predictable. That's why I asked at any one count to 20. I know you're never going to get more than 20 in there, and you're never obviously going to get less than 0 white red beads, okay? So it's completely predictable. Right? But instead we think about burn down charts and how hard people are working and these kind of things. Alrighty, so I'll send this to you after the session. Deming wrote his 14 points for management and his 7 deadly diseases. In fact, he expanded his deadly diseases. So I'll send these to you. But as you read through, this is written in the 50s and again in the 80s. Things in the West have not changed, okay? So have a look at those when I send them out to you after the session. And look at your own organisation or organisations that you've worked in the past and think, have things changed as much, okay? Because people aren't working on the system, they're working on the worker. Okay, so I'll flick through those. And there's the Deming deadly diseases. Constancy of purpose. Why are we here from the customer's point of view? Emphasis on short-term profits. We've seen this in the GFC. Number 3, evaluation by performance, merit rating, or annual review of performance. I'll meet my objectives on hell or never to the organisation because I want my bonus. Number 4, mobility of management to get out of their offices, get away from Outlook, and go into the work, try and find out what's going on in the work. There's a systems thinker called John Sedley who said Microsoft's greatest swindle was calling Outlook a productivity tool. Okay? It's not people are chained to Outlook and not going into the work to find out what's going on. Number 5, running a company on visible figures alone. We see that all the time. Number 6, neglect of long-range planning. 7, relying on technology to resolve problems. And I can show you an example of that later when we choose which presentation to go for next. 8, seeking examples to follow rather than innovating in our own organisation. And And the final one, which I suffer a lot, is no, this won't work around here. Our organisation is different. Is it? Okay, it's the question I always ask. So if you want to know more, there's a great book, it's about 100 odd pages, called Understanding Variation by Wheeler. It talks a lot about variation, different charts, how to predict performance, and those kind of things. Deming's book, Out of the Crisis, which he wrote many years ago, which hasn't really been heeded in the West. When he went to Japan, they credit him with turning around their economy after World War II. I'm damn sure they listened to what he said there. And there's a great book called I Want You to Cheat, which is all about people meeting their targets, regardless of what that does to the organisation. Some really good examples in there. Alright, so that's the end of this session. So hopefully you found it useful. So we'll have a few drinks, and then if you want to, we can go back and I can do another couple of talks or a talk. So we've got a couple of options. I'll give you a case study. It's about 25 minutes long or so of an organisation that actually did this, so you can see what happens when you do systems thinking. Or instead I can give you a theory around systems thinking, some of the work from Deming, and a bit more theory that you can take away and actually try in your workplace, okay? So I don't know how best we're going to vote on that, but a few drunken hands might go up. Or you might all go home, don't impress because you're working on things. Did you find that useful?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so thanks very much, and we'll pause for a bit and then we'll go to another one. Right?